What many perceived as a scandal became, in effect, a launch pad. The tape's release did not retreat into obscurity. It exploded into public conversation, pulling her name into headlines across tabloids, television, and the earliest social media buzz. In the light of that sudden surge of attention, something paradoxical occurred. The world stopped simply noticing her and started watching her. This moment did not shrink her presence, it magnified it. And from a marketing standpoint, it marked a seismic shift. Media exposure, whether embraced or resisted, had the power to define cultural relevance. This is the first lesson in contemporary fame. Sensationalism can crack open a door where no opportunity had previously existed. It feeds the collective curiosity, compelling audiences to question, talk, and return for more. Sensationalism does not automatically generate respect, but it does ignite visibility, a visibility so intense that it can eclipse other narratives and reshape public consciousness. And once that spark is lit, the strategy becomes less about hiding and more about harnessing. Her mother, Kris Jenner, recognized this with uncommon acuity. Where others saw a moment of crisis, she saw momentum. Instead of retreating from the spotlight, the family leaned in. They gave interviews, they appeared on talk shows, and they allowed cameras and journalists into their personal lives, not as reluctant participants, but as willing storytellers. They transformed personal vulnerability into currency. And in doing so, they didn't just normalize exposure, they institutionalized it. This intense exposure, however, required a sustaining force if it was to endure beyond the initial shock. Sensationalism was the ignition, but it was association that became the fuel. The second pivotal mechanism of her rise was strategic alignment, with social elites, industry power players, and cultural icons whose own influence could extend her reach. From early friendships with already established celebrities to partnerships with fashion designers, producers, and business leaders, every association lent legitimacy and broadened her cultural footprint. In marketing, association is a powerful tool. When a brand is linked to prestige, relevance, or desirability, that connection transfers value in the public mind. Paris Hilton, for example, was not merely a friend. She was an emblem of early-aughts celebrity culture, complete with magazine covers and international recognition. To be seen beside her was to step closer to prominence. Later relationships with artists, athletes, and industry figures served similar functions, reinforcing the narrative of influence and expanding her relevance across different cultural spheres. Yet association alone does not make audiences care. It only places a brand within a wider field of visibility. To transform attention into emotional investment, something deeper must take root. This brings us to the third catalytic factor in her meteoric rise: parasocial connection. Parasocial relationships are the sense of personal intimacy audiences develop with public figures, the feeling that you understand someone who has never met you. Through the family's reality television presence, candid interviews, social media posts, and public appearances, audiences were invited into what felt like a continuous, unfolding story. Rather than presenting polished, distant images, they revealed conflict, triumph, vulnerability, humor, and complexity. Viewers didn't just watch their lives, they felt a part of their lives. They saw siblings argue, parents console, relationships break and rebuild, celebrations and losses alike. This emotional proximity converted casual viewers into invested observers. It turned cultural commentary into collective memory. Over time, parasocial connection became less about spectacle and more about emotional investment, securing ongoing interest even when headlines faded. But no strategy, no matter how masterfully executed, is immune to consequence. The very forces that created her ascent also planted seeds of tension and challenge. The first major branding crisis that emerges from such dominant exposure is overexposure itself. When a persona becomes synonymous with shock, sensational headlines, and relentless media presence, the initial thrill diminishes. What once attracted attention begins to blend into a backdrop of constant visibility. Audiences grow accustomed, less reactive and less surprised. When every appearance, every Instagram reveal, or every public statement is positioned as unprecedented, the effect inevitably dulls. Once the audience begins to feel that nothing is new, the emotional spark that once drove engagement starts to fade. That's the paradox of sensationalism. It excels at capturing attention, but it requires ever greater provocations to sustain that same level of emotional engagement. And as interest plateaus, notoriety alone cannot carry the narrative forward. The next crisis is trust, a quality far more elusive than attention. Over years, the Kardashian brand expanded into multiple ventures, products, endorsements, lifestyle brands, and more. Some achieved tremendous commercial success, while others faltered or sparked skepticism. In an era where consumers crave authenticity, inconsistency can chip away at credibility. Trust, once eroded by a series of mixed results or perceived opportunism, is not easily regained. Audiences may still notice you, but they no longer fully believe in you. Finally, there is the matter of respect, perhaps the most misunderstood metric of all. Respect cannot be enforced through visibility or monetized through controversy. It is earned through sustained, substantive achievement that transcends surface spectacle. Even as billions of dollars flow through business ventures and market influence expands, public perception shaped by years of sensational coverage can remain stubbornly fixed. For many observers, reconciling earlier narratives rooted in tabloid controversy with later achievements in business and advocacy remains a complex psychological task. What remains, then, is not just the arc of a public figure, but a story that reflects the mechanics of modern media, culture, and human psychology. Fame in the digital era is not a passive state. It is a dynamic negotiation between visibility, vulnerability, association, and emotional investment. In Kim Kardashian's story, we see an intricate interplay of marketing strategy, cultural evolution, and personal identity, a narrative that both defines and complicates our understanding of celebrity. Her journey invites us to consider a deeper question. What does it mean to build a legacy in a world where everyone with a screen can be seen, talked about, and remembered, but also scrutinized, critiqued, and defined by forces beyond their control? Kim Kardashian's life, in all its complexity, suggests that the true cost of fame is not measured by the numbers we see in headlines, but by the silent transformations it demands from the human spirit. What many perceived as scandal became, in effect, a catalyst for cultural transformation. In 2007, a deeply private tape featuring Kim Kardashian and her then-boyfriend Ray J was released to the public, thrusting her into national attention amid a media frenzy and legal scrutiny. She even filed a lawsuit over its distribution before ultimately settling and permitting its sale, a move that generated significant publicity and profits. While some critics labeled its release invasive and exploitative, a breach of privacy amplified by internet culture, others saw in it the power of visibility itself. Unanswered questions and collective curiosity propelled her name into conversation across tabloids, television, and early reality TV buzz. This phenomenon aligns with what marketing professionals refer to as the curiosity gap, where gaps in understanding ignite attention and keep audiences returning for more. Within months, that attention became the foundation for the family's breakthrough reality show, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, debuting later that year. Sensationalism, the first major force in her public arc, goes beyond shock. It activates intrigue, compelling audiences to tune in, talk, and seek out what's next. The decision by her family, particularly her mother Kris Jenner, to embrace and channel that moment rather than shy away from it was strategic. Instead of retreating, they leaned into exposure, granting interviews, making media appearances, and shaping their personal narrative into a public story, turning scrutiny into momentum and public attention into opportunity. Yet this dynamic reflects a fundamental paradox at the heart of sensational fame. Capturing attention does not guarantee respect. Sensational events, by their nature, make someone known, but notoriety alone rarely produces admiration or trust. To move beyond tabloids and into cultural legitimacy, another mechanism was needed: association. Kim's ascent was not solitary. The Kardashian brand became inseparable from a network of high-profile relationships and cultural icons that broadened her influence and lent legitimacy to her visibility. In marketing terms, association transfers value, aligning a rising personality with established figures and cultural touchpoints can elevate perception. From early proximity to established celebrities to later partnerships and appearances across fashion, entertainment, and business spheres, these affiliations help transform her from a familiar face into a figure with cultural resonance. But association alone does not create deeper emotional investment. To build a lasting cultural presence, her story needed another dimension, one that goes beyond headlines and into the minds and emotions of audiences. This third force came in the form of parasocial connection, a psychological bond between public figures and audiences who feel they know so. They have never met. Through ongoing visibility on television, social media, and public platforms, viewers were repeatedly invited into the intimate rhythms of the Kardashian family's daily lives. They didn't just watch, they witnessed, reacted, and emotionally engaged with the ups and downs, conflicts, celebrations, and vulnerabilities on display. Over time, this created a feeling of shared experience. Audiences didn't simply observe the family, they lived alongside them in cultural consciousness, a powerful form of emotional loyalty that transcends the initial shock of sensational moments and anchors long-standing engagement. This emotional investment became the invisible architecture beneath the empire. It was the glue that converted casual viewers into devoted followers, turning episodic curiosity into sustained loyalty. Millions didn't just consume episodes, they anticipated them. They followed social channels not merely for updates, but for continuity, to remain part of an unfolding story. They debated relationships as if they were personal acquaintances, dissected conflicts as though they were involved, and celebrated milestones with a sense of shared triumph. This is the quiet genius of parasocial connection. It transforms visibility into intimacy, and intimacy into emotional attachment. Once audiences feel personally connected, disengagement becomes far more difficult. The brand is no longer external, it becomes woven into their cultural routine. But no empire built on attention remains immune to erosion. Even the most formidable brands eventually confront structural stress. The first and most predictable crisis is overexposure. When every aesthetic shift, romantic development, or headline-worthy revelation dominates the news cycle, novelty begins to decay. What once felt shocking slowly becomes expected. The spectacle that once commanded gasps now earns shrugs. Sensationalism, like any stimulant, loses potency with repeated use. The audience's threshold rises. The bar for surprise climbs higher and higher. Search interest that once surged with every new appearance begins to flatten. Cultural gravity, that invisible pull that keeps a figure at the center of conversation, subtly weakens. Without reinvention or deeper substance, attention becomes harder to sustain. The second crisis is more delicate: trust. Trust is not generated by headlines. It is cultivated through consistency. Over years of brand extensions, beauty lines, shapewear apps, endorsements, lifestyle ventures, the portfolio expands. Some projects succeed spectacularly, reshaping markets and generating billions. Others fade quickly or invite skepticism. In the long arc of public memory, inconsistency leaves residue. Audiences begin to question motives. Is the venture visionary or opportunistic? Is the message authentic or transactional? When commercial expansion appears relentless, even success can feel strategic rather than sincere. And trust, once fractured, is remarkably difficult to repair. Attention may remain, but belief begins to waver. Yet the deepest and most complex crisis is respect. Respect operates differently from fame. Fame thrives on visibility. Respect thrives on credibility. Fame tolerates controversy. Respect demands integrity. A brand built initially on spectacle must work exponentially harder to transcend it. Business triumphs, philanthropic gestures, even academic pursuits can shift perception. But public memory is long, and early narratives cling stubbornly to identity. For many observers, reconciling the image of a tabloid-era celebrity with that of a disciplined entrepreneur requires cognitive recalibration. It challenges deeply embedded impressions formed during years of sensational headlines and cultural caricature. And beneath these branding tensions lies a more human inquiry. What does it mean to evolve in public? When an identity is shaped under relentless scrutiny, every reinvention must battle the ghost of prior perception. Respect, unlike attention, cannot be engineered overnight. It is accumulated gradually through consistent demonstration of depth, resilience, and substance that endure beyond spectacle. In this way, the story becomes larger than one individual. It becomes a case study in modern celebrity itself, how fame is manufactured, how loyalty is engineered, and how the very mechanisms that build an empire can also threaten its longevity. Overexposure tests relevance. Broken trust tests credibility, and the pursuit of respect tests authenticity. The question that lingers is not whether the brand remains profitable. It is whether it remains meaningful. Beyond cultural analysis lies a deeper human story, the journey of an individual whose life unfolded in the spotlight, where every choice, every exposure, and every reinvention became part of a shared public narrative. Kim Kardashian grew up surrounded by influence. Her father was a well-known attorney and her family moved in celebrity circles. Yet she was not yet a cultural fixture in her own right until a defining moment in 2007, when a personal videotape with her then-boyfriend Ray J was leaked to the public, bringing immediate and intense attention that ultimately became a turning point in her visibility. Behind the shimmer of fame is a person shaped by early experiences of conditional love, external validation, and performance-based worth. Dynamics not uncommon for someone who was once more known for helping organize closets and assisting a socialite friend than for global recognition. What began as private moments and ordinary roles transformed rapidly into relentless public scrutiny, sparking debates about privacy, exploitation, and how much of oneself must be surrendered to be seen. Fame, it turns out, cannot be quantified merely by attention metrics, revenue figures, or cultural influence. Its deeper cost is measured in private turmoil, identity negotiations, and the invisible price paid for being watched by millions. Kim Kardashian's trajectory is more than a celebrity story. It is a case study in modern fame, media dynamics, and the complex interplay between personal identity and public perception. She rose from relative obscurity to global prominence not through traditional paths of performance or awards, but through a nuanced navigation of visibility, association, and relentless audience engagement. In many ways, she belongs to an era where visibility is a form of currency, where narrative is power, and where the human desire to be known and understood is both amplified and distorted by the very forces that grant fame. In understanding her story, we gain insight into the architecture of contemporary celebrity, a world shaped by relentless media cycles, parasocial intimacy, and the cultural hunger for connection through exposure. And perhaps, in witnessing her rise and the dynamics that propelled it, we see reflections of our own collective yearning, the longing to be seen, accepted, and valued for who we truly are, even in a world defined by endless visibility and the shadow it casts on individual identity.